Welcome to the Inner Fire Climbing Podcast. Don't worry, my voice will sound normal on the episode. I know that people who have kids are sick all the time. I thought it would start a little bit later. It appears to have begun at 6 months. I feel fine, by the way, just my voice. My guest on the show today is Carly Rager, or Rager. Apparently either one is okay, continuing the trend of me mispronouncing my guest's name. I am truly a professional podcast host. Carly is a climbing coach. She owns the company Project Direct, a climbing coaching company. She's an ex-engineer. I'm an ex-software engineer. Our coaching philosophies are quite aligned. The only difference, I guess, is Carly's mainly a sport climber and I'm mainly a boulderer, so that did provide some interesting distinctions as we talked about all kinds of things related to training for climbing. Got into a lot of philosophy stuff, for sure. We also talked quite a lot about actual climbing and traveling. Carly is quite an experienced climber. She climbs 513 seemingly on the regular. And she also recently completed a multi-pitch first ascent in Mexico, which we talk about a good amount. Unfortunately, our first call was interrupted. Carly was in Turkey and we had some tech issues. It was night there. Actually, if you have a keen ear, you can hear some cats meowing. That's a staple of Turkish life, I suppose. But Carly had to abscond quickly, and so the conversation kind of takes a 2-week break in the middle, but we sort of pick up where we left off, and the audio quality may change a little bit, but don't worry about that. The conversation is great, and I especially felt once Carly was back stateside, the second half of the conversation was great, and we got into a lot of really interesting stuff related to endurance and training philosophy and the difference between training for sport and bouldering, yada, yada, yada. Anyways, Carly's awesome. I think I'll have her back on the show pretty much ASAP because there's just so much to talk about, and I really enjoyed talking to her. Felt like I learned a lot, and I hope you do too. All right, without further ado, Carly Rager. We finally made it. Carly Rager on the pod.
Yes,
Welcome.
We're doing it. Yeah. The Colombia to Turkey. Well, I went Colombia to the Czech Republic to Turkey. It's been a bit of a trip, but in a really good way. And I'm in Turkey now, which is a place I've wanted to go since 2021. So I actually had a ticket here in 2021, and like just a handful of weeks beforehand, I sublocated my elbow in a bouldering fall. And so I ended up canceling that ticket. And so this is a place it's been on my radar for a long time. I've really wanted to come and climb here. And so, yeah, I'm psyched that I'm actually here.
Yeah. Is it Gaic Bayri? I don't know how to say it. Is it that place?
Yes.
Or Antalya or whatever? Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yes. So near Antalya, you would like fly into Antalya. And then there's Gaic, which I also feel like I have yet to pronounce correctly. And then Chitabi, which is kind of, it's just one canyon over and is like, just, I guess, I kind of hate the word like premier crag, but like, damn, like really hard lines, absolutely striking crag. And that comes into season later. So that's just starting to come into season right now. It's just starting to dry out. And then the rest of the area is kind of like still in season, but towards the end of the season. So there's a lot of different aspects of like where you can climb, sun and shade and things like that. So I've just been kind of getting to know it in that way, and working a hard line, but also playing on some other hard lines that I might want to come back to.
Cool. How long have you been there, and how long do you have left?
I've been here about 2 weeks, and I have about 2 weeks left. So we're just kind of right in the middle of the trip.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you? I know I'm asking. I'm just always curious about this stuff, but like, how do you pick when you have a month? Like, do you usually dig into a hard thing or a couple hard things, or do you spend a lot of time doing like on-siting and stuff too?
It depends on if I've been to a place before and if I'm familiar with the style. Like I was previously in Colombia, I was in La Mojada, and that's a place I had been before where I got to go and do that volume on-siting, get to know the style kind of trip. Which I think is super, super valuable and very fun because like all of these different climbing styles really require different skills. And during the first trip to Lamahara, I totally was like, whoa, this is a style that I don't know if I've really climbed that much before, and I have a lot to learn here. For people listening, it's sort of similar to, I would compare it to the New River Gorge in terms of like big horizontal breaks, really big moves. Like I'm like doing a dyno on a 12B. I'm like, okay, all right. But cool. And also a lot of hand heel matches, a lot of mantling, and just kind of moving between these big horizontals, not a lot of intermediates, so a lot of power and these kinds of things. So first time I went to Lamahara, I did that kind of trip where I was like, I have a lot to learn here. Like I'm not really trying to I'm not really trying to bite off anything that's sort of project-y for me. Just trying to climb a lot and have fun and really kind of be like, okay, what am I learning from this style? So then I went back in February, and it's kind of crazy how our bodies hold that knowledge and that familiarity, because I went back in February and I was like, it still took a day or two of like, oh yeah, right. I kind of remember this. But then it kind of felt like it was in me. And then I was like, okay, now I would go for a harder, like, I still did, I think I did a couple 12 pluses, a 13A, and then a 13C, like in the trip, and felt like that was a good, like it felt like that flow was productive for me to like have that time to get to know the style before I tried something hard, and I think that's the case for most people.
Yeah, and then coming to Turkey, I guess I've only just followed you a little bit on the internet, but like from afar, it seems like limestone tufa climbing is like something you've done quite a bit of. That's a little more your comfort zone.
Fully, yeah. And so coming here, it kind of felt like I maybe didn't need that intro trip or that intro handful of weeks. I'm still in a new place. I wanted to climb all the things, and I did like a handful of days of just on-siting and getting to know the place. But because I have depth of experience with limestone tufist climbing from El Salto and from Red Oyar, I didn't really feel like it's every place is going to have its own like little things that are different, but it's not that dissimilar from what I'm pretty used to. So I felt in this location, I was fine with like going for a 13C or 8A plus like pretty quickly because I'm just familiar with it.
Yeah, it's more like I feel the same thing. I just got back from 3 weeks of climbing on sandstone, and like it's always an adjustment. And Tennessee is definitely more granite like than most sandstone that I've climbed on, but like if I went to Magic Wood or something, I'm pretty confident that I would be like climbing near my limit grades like right off the bat. Whereas when I show up at a sandstone crag, or if I go to Font, or if I was going to go to Castle Hill or something, it's like I'm definitely ready to start back over from the apprenticeship position.
Yeah. You like get out your notepad and you're just like, all right, I'm here to learn.
Yeah.
I'm
ready to get smoked on a V4.
Yeah, exactly. You were in chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've
first
never
time.
Been there. How was it?
It's amazing, man. It's everything that's cracked up to be, for sure. It's like an American Mecca. And like, probably, even though a lot of people like Eric Jerome, like people whose opinion I really respect on bouldering, have told me that it's great, I feel like it still kind of flies under the radar compared to a lot of other areas. And maybe that's just the weather. I'm not sure. But just the number of satellite areas and like the quality of the rock and how cool the town is, I was immediately like, yeah, I could live here, at least in winter, for sure.
Damn. Okay. All right. That sounds cool. Yeah, I've never been there. I've done, admittedly, a pretty small amount of climbing east of the Mississippi River in the U.S. So,
same. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially you being in Washington, it's like there's a lot of country between Washington and Chat.
Yeah, and I feel like you and we have an interesting like, I don't know, we probably have I don't want to say yin yang, but we probably fit together in a weird way where it seems like you've done like a lot of the available sport climbing and been to many of the crags and explored a lot of the obvious stuff for sport climbing. And then I've done the same thing for bouldering, but like I have a very paltry experience with sport climbing. Yeah. Like I spent 3 summers in Wyoming and I've never clipped a bolt there, which I think disturbs a lot of people who spend a lot of time in Wyoming.
Right.
The bouldering is actually exceptional in Wyoming.
We'll talk about that later. Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. Like, I guess maybe that's a cool thing, that you can go to a single area and have these vastly different experiences, and create like a vastly different profile of that experience based on what you're psyched on. But yeah, I think you're right. Is like I have spent a lot of years kind of traveling around and seeing different areas, which I'm incredibly grateful that I get to do that. But yeah, you come at it from the bouldering, much more the bouldering side, but then I think we also kind of think through things similarly. If I'm
maybe, yeah,
like,
we're gonna find out today.
We're gonna see.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point to just introduce you to anybody who's not familiar with your name. Who are you? Why are you here?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Carly Rager. I am the founder and head coach of.
Oh, it is Rager. I thought it was. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
At this point, it's both. You can say either, and it's totally fine.
I think Chelsea said Rager. Chelsea Murren, friend of the pod, so we can blame her for the mispronunciation.
Yeah, both work. Actually, I don't actually know how it's supposed. We don't really know how it's supposed to be pronounced. I think it was actually McGregor when it came. It was like an Ellis Island change where they were just like, nah, it's Rager now. And so there's not like a real right way. But yeah, on my birth certificate is Carly Rager or Carly Rager, depending on how you want to say it.
All right. We've gotten down to the bare truth. We're talking about birth certificates now.
Yeah. Let me know what other documents you need. But yeah, I'm founder and head coach of Project Direct Coaching, which I started about more than 5.5 years ago, which seems kind of crazy to say. And I'm here to chat with you about whatever good things that we can. I think we were talking, climbing coaching and movement, and gonna try to give you guys a perspective that we have, or maybe we'll argue about some things. Who knows? That could be fun too.
Yeah, I haven't had like a good spicy argument on the podcast yet. So. Maybe we'll am I right in thinking that you have a team of coaches now, but you personally, am I right in thinking you're a little more sport trad orientated in general?
Yeah, I would say maybe like sport and multi-pitch. And I do trad climb, in the realm of multi-pitch climbing. I do a little less like single pitch trad climbing, but yeah, most of what my experience, coaching experience, and personal goals live in hard single pitch sport climbing and then multi-pitch climbing. So that's kind of those are the zones that I've existed the most in.
Okay, how much of the year do you usually spend on trips like this? Because I think you said you just went from Colombia to the Czech Republic to Turkey. Like, I didn't notice that home was not in the itinerary.
Yeah, that one. So good question. And I think that's actually a balance that I'm trying to figure out myself. So maybe don't have the exact answer in terms of how long. But I think ideally I want to be abroad a few months a year, and it's just easier for me to kind of put it all together. And then travel in the U.S. a couple months a year. So I'm based in Boulder, Colorado, and that is like my intention to be based there, despite the travel itinerary that you just said. But probably abroad 2 to 3 months a year, traveling in general, 4 to 5 months a year, and then I'm based in Boulder the rest of the time. So all of that is a balance that I'm working to strike in a way that feels sustainable, but also, I think for me, and I've come to this realization in the last several years, is like traveling to climb is a big motivator for me. I think going to a place where I am going to get different perspective or learn something or get to speak Spanish for hours or be pushed to speak Spanish a few more hours than my brain wants me to, that I think is a motivator for me. And so, being abroad a few months a year is really important for me personally. And then climbing around the U.S. as well to all our good spots.
Cool. Yeah, it is interesting that, like, I feel like maybe, I don't know if this has changed, but I feel like when I started climbing, travel was just sort of like a baked in thing. It was like part of climbing was like seeing new environments and like expanding your skills. And maybe that's just born of like 50 years ago, like people only knew about, Yosemite and like Joshua Tree and like 3 other crags. So it's just like, you just kind of had to travel. Maybe we don't have to do that as much as we used to, but yeah, it feels like the two are like quite intertwined for me. And it's been a while since I went to a new place. It felt really good to go to chat and just be like, oh yeah, I forgot this part of the sport is so cool, even if you're not like sending hard, which I definitely was not because we have a 4-month-old.
Yeah. Just that 4-month-old, you're sending parenting. That you were sending parenting.
Yeah, it was like, what is it like to have a baby at the crag? That is the, that was the lesson. And it was honestly, it was really fun and like, and, heartwarming and stuff. But yeah, there was not a lot of hard sending.
That's okay. I think that's a misconception that people that climb hard all the time, actually. And I think that's, maybe that's a result of just kind of the, I don't know, climbing media or what we choose to share. And, but that's not the case. We have a lot of times where that's not happening.
You can fight it, but your relationship with the sport is gonna change as you age. And I have like lots of time to do hard climbing ahead of me for sure. But even in the last, let's say 5 years, short timeline, maybe 10 years, but definitely even in the last 5 years, like the amount I can climb in a week is changing. And I'm sure it's going to continue to change. But the amount of like fried chicken and waffles that I can go out for is like not going down anytime soon, or like, I remember being in South Africa in 2019 and there was this group of Aussies there and there was a guy that was there with them who I guess he had been their team coach, but these kids weren't on a team anymore. They were in their 20s, but he was just like their friend. I think he was probably 55 or 60 or something. And he just came out to the boulders with them. He had a V3 project. He was like eating, cake and like drinking Amarula milkshakes, which is like the local like liquor that they have there. And just raging. He was just having a great time. And he was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing with my retirement or whatever. And I was like, hell yeah, man.
Hell yeah.
I'm filing that away in my brain for...
Send me that Amarillo milkshake recipe so I can get that later. No, I kind of feel the same. Like, I hope when I'm 70, I'm up on some 5/8 multi-pitch, like, swearing into the void and just, like, hollering at the moon. Like, actually, that is what I want for myself.
Nice. That's sick.
And, but... yeah, the relationship definitely changes over time with the sport, and finding the way to make that sustainable, I think, is super important. And also, I think I also want to challenge the idea that age means that your relationship changes, and then that also, I feel like almost with that, it's almost people are like, oh yeah, and then you send less, or you don't climb as hard. And you might have focus seasons where you do and where you don't, but like I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've never felt as strong or skilled ever. And I'm not talking about sending less hard, and I'm 35. And I'm sending harder. My relationship with the sport has changed, that is for sure. But I just want to like decouple those two concepts, I think, as well, and make sure that's
I think I agree. I mean, I'm definitely the most skilled and also like physically the most muscular and the most powerful that I've ever been at 39. I think for me, the piece of that conversation that is the reason they're decoupled, I agree with you, they are decoupled, but the reason they're decoupled is like the things that are, quote, holding me back, which is not really a fair phrase. The things that make it harder to send hard as I've aged are really not just that I'm 39. It's that I now have a family and a kid and I have to like take care of those things.
Right.
And there's no negotiation or like wiggle room on that. Those things just become the priority in a sense. But I have also climbed like a couple really hard boulders since my daughter was born. So it's not like it's impossible for sure.
Right. Yeah. You're just recalibrating the way that it looks on a weekly basis.
Your execution has to get really good. That's if you want to be a parent, like you got to get really good.
I believe that. For sure. Maybe that's like going to turn into your secret weapon.
I think it already was, which maybe is why I've been able to like find some success already. Cool. But it's definitely, if I was going to like give advice to, people who are thinking about being parents, it's like, practice only having a few tries on your project because it's coming your way. For bouldering, I mean, for sport climbing, you already kind of have to only have a few tries usually. So yeah. Anyways, how do you said, making it sustainable, like traveling for 4 or 5 months a year, even if you weren't a business owner and a coach, which I imagine you spend a crazy amount of time scheduling and rescheduling athlete calls, changing time zones, because I know what that is like. But like, how do you make the training and stuff sustainable traveling that much?
That's a good question. Dude, yeah, no, for real, being in Turkey right now. So it's 10 a.m. it's 10 a.m. It's 8.
Yeah.
It's 10:30 there. It's 8:30 p.m. here. My like calendar and my like time zone calculations are just like constantly going. I'm like, all right, Eastern time to Central Europe, because I have athletes. I have an athlete in France, Netherlands, Germany, Mexico City, all over the U.S. So I'm just like have this weird knowledge of time zones that I get pretty good at. But in terms of making it sustainable from a training perspective, I think is a good question to have, because I am on the like latter end of this trip, and usually that is kind of a limiter. I can go pretty hard both in terms of my mental motivation and my physical like feeling good, and lack of tweaks and things like that. But usually around the 6 or 7 week mark for me, I can definitely feel like I turn into a bit of a noodle. I turn into a bit.
Yeah, you lose a little stiffness and power. Yeah,
and I can definitely feel that is like not too far away. But I think I look at it from the lens of when I'm on a hard project, what feels limiting to me. What is the factor that I change that results into ascent, and how is the strength training that I do and all of that fitting in. And really for all the 13 pluses that I've sent, it's almost always a slight movement understanding. I need to actually weight the left hand more and the right foot less. I was climbing like this powerful bouldery sequence, but now I need to flip and be like, stop dropping and popping, and I need to like lock off and be static here because I'm going to whatever. These kinds of things have been typically the differentiating factor between sending and not sending at a 13 plus level for me. So with that in mind, like I do train a lot, and like when I go home, I'm going to be like pretty much lifting and bouldering for a good chunk of time to kind of take myself out of the noodle stage. But I just kind of am like, right now I'm becoming a better climber. I'm using the skills and strength that I have to understand these nuances better, perhaps put some things that weren't fully intuitive for me physically or proprioceptively. I'm taking those things and I'm trying to make them more intuitive. And then I'm going to do that to the point, right, where like physically I'm going to be a little tired, mentally I'm going to be a bit tired, and then I'm going to come back to my training. And really my training time is like, I'm not trying to send hard at all anymore. And so I am back in the gym. I'll probably go out climbing still like once a week, but it's joy climbing. And then I'm back in the gym for probably at least 2 months with no big projects or big like, oh, I'm going to try to send something hard in mind. I'm kind of just like, wow, I learned all of this. Those were really good lessons. I'm glad I had the physical fitness to like give 4 goes on the project and learn that much, and then send some things. But then I'm like, I'm going to take all of those lessons from movement school that I've gotten to have over these last couple months, or if somebody's listening, like over the couple months of your season, even if it's in just one spot. And then that season ends and you keep that with you, and now you go back and rebuild the physical side of things. And I don't know, actually, I'm curious to your thoughts on this, if this is like a bit more like when I say noodle, because I'm like sport climbing, if you find you see similar ebbs and flows like with your bouldering, if you have like, your season, and how you feel at the end of your season or when you cut that off. But for me, it's kind of like really giving credence and time and attention to the little movement things that I'm picking up on these limit projects, which I think to me a limit project means that movement is not intuitive. I'm having to think about it, and then I take that back into my training, and it's just like this revolving door of these things. Yeah,
you notice some things that were areas for improvement or things you could have picked up quicker if you'd been more intuitive about them and stuff.
100%.
As far as like how it vibes with bouldering, I think for me, towards the end of an intense season, I would say it's less like a noodle and more like a crushed noodle. It's like it's less that I'm losing strength and power, and more that I'm just like, I tend to be pushing my soft tissues like closer and closer to the limit. At the end of a bouldering season, I don't feel like I'm powered down. I just feel like tired, and usually have more tweaks, twinges, things like that. Just because I I really rely on like weightlifting to feel good and strong and healthy. And also like, I think my off-season training does have a lot of high velocity stuff in it, but I'm not, if the conditions are good and the season's hitting, I will definitely go try a project for 3 or 4 hours and like hit the same moves for quite a long time if I feel like I have a window to like make headway or to send something. And I don't do that in my training season. And I think that's why a couple months in, I feel pretty haggard. It's like as I would expect.
That makes sense.
I think the interesting thing that's maybe not as much of a contrast as some people would think is like, usually for me, the thing that determines whether I send a boulder is exactly the same thing as what you said determines whether you send a really hard route or not. It is usually some nuance of the movement. It's very, very rare that it's totally a recruitment thing or a power thing. Cause like during the season for sure, even if you're bouldering, like your total power and recruitment are going to be going down a little bit. I always tell people it's like, maybe this is more obvious with sport climbing that your power is going down, but even with bouldering, your power is going down during the season, but your rock sense and like your connection to what's going on should be going up. Mm-hmm. And it's always those little details for bouldering and for sport climbing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time it seems like, and all of our training and all of our weightlifting and all of our things that we're doing in the gym are like allowing us enough time and exposure to the project where we can maybe have, like, ideally I want to have 4 good burns on a route in a day. And so if we think about, I'm going to learn the final little movement nuance on my 20th burn, or my, let's just say for the sake of easy math. Well, that's going to happen if I have a fit and healthy and very resilient body. That 20th burn is going to happen on session 5.
Yep.
That's not too, for me, like
instead of session 7 if you get 3 tries a day.
Yeah, or session 10 if you get 2 tries a day, or session next season if you get hurt because you're like, for whatever reason you weren't really trained for that amount of load. So that's kind of how I think about it too. But that's funny that you said you just feel like a crushed noodle, and I feel like a noodle because I was like, when I was out in Leavenworth, and I was bouldering with Chelsea, and I was just like, just show me all the fun. Like, I want to do a volume trip and get to know the style and all these things. And on Emperor's Lightning, which I did, like the go before I did it, or no, it was this, I did it. It was out there one session. There's like a pretty deep knee bar that I'm torquing on the knee, and then I just like fell a couple times in just like a few spots, and I woke up the next morning and I was like, yeah, okay, bouldering is such a contact sport. Like,
it really is.
Goodness. And then went out and I think I did it that next session, but I could already still feel a little bit the knee, and I could already still feel a little bit the compression in my spine, and I was like, yeah, like crushed noodle would be, that's I was like, yeah, after 2 weeks of volume bouldering, even I felt that way. So it was kind of like, that makes sense. Yeah, that's how you feel.
Bouldering is hardcore, man, for sure. Like,
it is.
When you were saying earlier, like, I want to push back on the like not climbing harder as you age, I was like, yeah, I totally feel that way about sport climbing. I got like a lot of room, and I'm going to still climb hard boulders. Don't get me wrong. I will definitely be climbing V12 or 13 when I'm 45, but I won't be bouldering 12 months a year anymore. Like, that shit's got to stop at a certain point. It's just, it really is the back for me. I've accumulated. I mean, and I started bouldering before pads were good, and I was a dumbass, and I did a lot of tall things ground up and took lots of stupid falls and missed my pads, and there are extenuating circumstances that probably don't apply to all people for me, but it's the mileage. In the words of Indiana Jones, it's not the years, it's the mileage.
No, that's that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's a limit on how many times you can impact the ground and still feel spry.
I think so. And I will say, like, since I've tapered back a lot, it's more like there's a limit on how many times I can do it in a week or in a month or something like that. And I can still do it. I actually took a couple huge falls at the end of our chat trip because I was trying like a quite tall boulder with a really hard mantle. And I mean, I can still do it. It's a lot more intimidating than it used to be, and I get absolutely folded when I fall off of tall things now. I just like don't have as much stiffness as I used to. But I can still take the falls, you know what I mean? It's not like my back was a little sore for a couple days, but like it's fine. That's part of the sport for sure.
I love the term absolutely folded.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
I've learned you learn when you boulder when you climb tall things, you learn to fall like not in the squat width, but with your legs a little bit wider than that, because the first time you take a big fall and your nose makes contact with your knee cap, you learn not to like make that mistake again, because it's really quite painful. You have to have space for your head. Is this making sense?
Yeah, no, it is, but it's adding to the visual of folded as a good verb that I need to add.
This is way off base, but it's crazy to watch the World Cup athletes, who are these young athletes, and they have a lot of like power and a lot of stiffness, and they'll climb these super tall walls and then drop from the finishing hold, and they just land standing and like nothing bends in their whole body. You know what I mean? I'm like, how are you dropping from 15 feet up and like not even squatting a little bit? Like, that stiffness is crazy.
Yeah, they're just landing and ready to go. They could just land
Posed.
and do a box jump or pose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So do you keep, I mean, if you're on the road for this long, because you were in Colombia and then now you're in Turkey for a month, like, will you lift weights while you're in Turkey?
No, and it's like, I think so I did bring with me tension block and loading pin, and so I do try to, in Colombia they had like some amount of weights at the place I was staying, so I was able to do, partially for some warm-ups. The climb that I was doing there was like really quite crimpy, but I mean, for the large part, no, and especially when you're doing more like adventure type climbing and you're in more remote areas and you're gonna ask somebody if there's like weights around, and people are gonna be like, what? Yeah. They're like, there's the restaurant, there's where you get tea, you can get Wi-Fi over there sometimes, but like, don't count on it too much. And I've tried in the past to kind of think about that, but ultimately I think the reality of it is, if you can bring a tension block and a loading pin and maintain some of that on your fingers, that's awesome. But I think I just try to fully immerse in the rock and like
cool.
let that go for the most part. And while on paper, like if we were drawing up some very scientific, like athletic, you know what I mean, like looking at all my metrics and all of these and detraining timelines, right, like that, and I was like, in a lab as a lab rat, like, right, that's not the answer that we would give, but the reality of climbing is it's not in a lab, and that's like why we like it. But then with that comes into like, just immerse yourself in where you are. If I tell people a lot, some people will be going on a trip for like a 2-week trip, and they're like, should I be doing some like maintenance or maintaining? And I'm like, you're on a 2-week trip in a new place that you don't know the style. If you still have enough energy for a core workout, I want you to go on set another 511 in that style.
Yeah.
Like that, that's kind of where and so I take that mentality too. Like if I have a little bit more left to give at the end of the day, I'm going to go try to on-site something. Like on-siting is a skill that I've spent a lot of time developing over the last couple of years, and it is a fully separate skill, and so like work on that skill, like work something that's right in front of you. You're in this amazing place with this world class, or even if it's not world class, but like new climbing, go on-site something and spend your time there. And outside of the realm of like really necessary PT, if somebody has like, okay, I have to do this PT, it's just as like required, then I'm like, yes, for sure. But in terms of just maintenance weightlifting, no.
Yeah. And a heavy band is super light. Like that's an easy, if you need to do some basic loading, like heavy bands are probably an easy way to go. I think it becomes like, at least in my coaching and for myself, it becomes a question of like how much ramp up time or even suffering are you like willing to endure on the back end of a trip or the back end of a season? Because like a lot of my, like I said, I wind up at the end of my seasons, a lot of them I wind up like pretty tired, and I'm willing to tolerate like being quite tired in the beginning of summer or the beginning of winter, and like needing to do a ramp up phase. But there's been a few, so like 2 falls ago I tried this V13 and I wound up with like 2 kind of chronic overuse injuries because I just kept extending the season. A friend of mine who's kind of a wizard put like a 40-foot by 40-foot tarp on the boulder, and so I could like keep trying it even after it had started snowing. Shout out Kerwin, he's badass. And like,
nice.
Turned out to actually be not the smartest thing to like try it for 3 months instead of 2, because I was kind of paying for it for quite a while. And so there's a part of me that's like, if I had pulled back on that a little bit and maybe like done a little bit more maintenance stuff and ended the season at an appropriate time, maybe I wouldn't have started my winter training in such a deficit and needed to like deal with these injuries. And then now, a year and a half later, I would be like closer to being ready to try that project again, which I do feel like I'm ready to try it, but like maybe I could have tried it last fall. Well, I had a baby last fall, so that doesn't make sense. But in theory, you know. Right.
If you were a lab rat as well.
If I was a lab rat, yeah. It's never in a vacuum. It's never in a vacuum,
no,
right?
really
but these are the questions that people ask me all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's going on 1-2 week trip a year, I totally agree with you. It's like, just rip it, dude. Just get super tired.
Mm-hmm.
Don't like, who cares how tired you are when you get home? Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about like a 3-month climbing season, and then they're going to have another 3-month climbing season in 3 more months, it's like, it kind of makes sense to start your training from a higher level so that you're more prepared for next season, right? What do you think?
I see what you're saying for sure, because I've had like, after Mexico, around this time last year, I was like 3 months in Mexico, and I was like had by the time I got back, and I was like like in all these ways, and but I do think maybe to some extent this might be where a little bit there's some differing in terms of like bouldering and sport climbing, because I was had in a way that wasn't so soft tissue, like injury based at the end of that trip. I think tired. It was like tired. But I have this is an interesting question. I think I actually had a similar experience this fall. So there's this 8B plus that I got close to sending in Colorado, or sorry, I've been converting to the other grade
Hero
system
grades.
for like for this 14A that I one hung a few times in Colorado, and like, you know, I got the like totally had the one hang fever, where it's like I one hung it in 2 different spots. Like these were very good close overlapping links, and then kind of had that, and then okay, now I'm TR soloing it. Now it's 43 degrees. Now we're out here using very, very small holds without like, maybe I could warm up at the gym, but then I have to drive an hour to the project, and now I'm out here like, wait, does my hand hurt? I can't tell because I can't feel it.
Can't even tell.
And I probably did go a session or 2 deeper than I maybe was wise, right? Because now then my hamstring hurt, and then one of my knees kind of started hurting a little bit just from these same moves over and over and over again. And so, I do think there is some, I kind of, eventually I did pull off, and I was like, that was a really cool experience. I got to learn that it's possible, but we're really kind of pushing into like teeth grinding here, you know, like this isn't quite the most productive. So and luckily in that I didn't have any like real injuries, but I do think anytime that your body starts giving you those yellow lights, that's really what kind of did it for me. Is I was like, all right, my right hamstring hurts, my left knee hurts, and it's like my body's telling me this is like probably enough for right now. I think it's good to listen to those things sooner rather than later, and maybe as we climb more and have more of those experiences, right? Like I said, maybe I took that one like 2 sessions further, but I don't think I took it crazy far. You know, and so when I'm talking to athletes, I'm kind of trying to ask those questions too. It's like, what are those yellow lights? What are we looking for? But also could be yellow lights mentally if we're talking about trad climbing and multi-pitch climbing, in terms of like risks that you're taking, risks that you feel like you're productively managing, or are you starting to get on the back end of that too? Because I think that there's a big part of that comes into play when you're doing stuff that's not at a crag. And so those are questions that I think are worth asking too. So that way we don't get so much in a hole.
The mental fatigue probably builds up quite a bit over a long, like 3 months in Mexico trying. That was when you were trying your long thing, right?
And so there was like sport climbing in that too. But we did this 14 pitch first free ascent, which like the climbing felt like about a third of it. So there's a mental fatigue aspect too, but I think that ultimately though, I think also a good question to ask is how much does this individual route or project or boulder matter to you? And is this something that holds the significance that you're willing to go deep into that hole for? In which case, dig deep, go for it. And I think in Mexico, the answer was yes for me. I was like, I'm gonna and I don't care what happens in May. I'm gonna lay on my couch. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna go for it. And then the answer probably about the other one is like, no, I really want to have like a productive training season, and this isn't like, this maybe doesn't feel as meaningful to me in this moment, so it's easier to pull off. But I think that having those conversations are important, and not getting into the mentality of like, I've chosen this as my project, so I must complete it or die. So that, like getting into like, I think a lot of high level climbers and are driven people, and driven people have the tendency to be like, I started it, I must finish it.
Sure. Or treating it like it's like a race that you're running, where you're just like trying to get to the finish line like as fast as you can. But that's just very rarely how the projecting process works out. I think that's probably one benefit of experience, and it could be a benefit of like working with a coach, is just like I like working with athletes where they sign up for 8 or 12 weeks, and I'm going to like show them a planner that is 2 years long and just say like, let's look at all this stuff that you're talking about doing, and actually like put things on the map and kind of contextualize all the things that you want to do. And honestly, if somebody had sat me down 2 falls ago and just been like, look what it is that you want to do next spring and next fall, and think about how your hamstring and your bicipital groove feel, and like whether or not you're really like on track with the other stuff that you want to do in 2025. And it probably would have like snapped me out of the reverie a little bit. But it's also like, I say this all the time, people on the podcast are probably sick of hearing it. Athletes are unreasonable people. Like, we're not out here making rational decisions all the time. We're out here like trying to get it, and we're trying to get it while the getting's good, So you need a balance of both things for sure.
I like that so much. That's so
I've
true.
been a lot smarter since I went too deep on Sling Blade. I've been a lot smarter, and like much of the mental anguish of dealing with those injuries, I've redirected into what am I doing to make sure that the next time I go hard on this thing, the outcome is different than it was that time, try to like make something of all that anguish so that it's not wasted.
That's very reasonable of you. That's
yeah. It's like a pendulum. It's like a weeble wobble. It's a pendulum, It's like it
is
super unreasonable, and you come back to something that's a little bit more, I'm much more rational here sitting at my desk than I am out trying the boulder.
For sure. If you would have heard the screaming I did en route like last week, you'd have been like, yeah, that's an unreasonable human being. Whatever's happening up there doesn't check the reasonable boxes. But yeah, I think then we like go back and we make a reasonable we take time to make a reasonable assessment of like what went well, what didn't go well, what were the limiting factors, and then hopefully if we're lucky we get to go have another chance with all of that knowledge, or work with a coach that can kind of help you see some of your blind spots and maybe your thinking on it, whether that's a projecting process, like thought process, or if that's like how you're approaching your training for it and contextualizing that. I think that outside perspective is so huge. We're just, as humans, I think pretty bad at objectively self-assessing. I mean, maybe we get better at it over the years, but to have somebody that's sitting there with you and is like, all right, like, do you see the holes in here? Because this is kind of what I'm seeing is really valuable.
And sometimes even, like I think there's I might be wrong about the details, but there's like a nutrition study they did where they just had people take pictures of like their pantry and their fridge every day, and then like tracked the outcomes, and like just forcing people to take a picture of what they had in their pantry was like enough to change the type of things that over time, over like a couple months or whatever, change the type of things that they would buy and keep in their pantry, because they have this just accountability of like, they know they're sending a picture of it to somebody on the other end. And so they like start to notice. I mean, in my head is immediately like, well, you just take the M&Ms and like put them in a different cupboard, but maybe that wasn't allowed in I don't know what the rules of the study were. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's a quantum observer thing where that you just need somebody else to see it. And then that's enough to like kind of snap people out of it. But yeah, obviously an experienced coach is really helpful. When you I want to jump back a little bit, because you said a third of the effort was climbing. So like, what is the other? As somebody who's never done a 14 pitch climb, I think I did a 5 pitch 5.9 once.
Hell
pretty badass.
Yeah, that sounds like a great.
What is the rest of it? What's it made of?
Yeah, what's it made of? So my good friend Mango and I did this 14 pitch first free ascent in Mexico on this mountain called La Gloria, and this was last winter. And I think that particular one had more unknowns because nobody knew the difficulty of pitch 11 and 12. And so that just added a whole other realm in terms of logistics planning because, well, let's just start with the approach. The approach is heinous. It is just so heinous. Like
even to the base.
To the base is like 1.3 miles and 2,700 feet of vert.
Oh God. Okay. That's almost climbing.
So, and part of it was kind of climbing. So it was like, the like last maybe 900 feet of I don't know. I'm going to guess like 900 feet of vertical elevation gain. You were kind of scrambling. So like, but with like a 50-pound haul bag on your back and there's no water source up there. So you're doing it a couple times to like store, like stash water. And so that experience in itself felt like, like a big effort. It basically, to get all of our camping, climbing, water, everything that we might need up there for potentially, we're not sure exactly how long we're going to be up there. The approach was unknown. There is no trail. Like that in itself was like an undertaking kind of like physically for sure. Like my legs were like I was pretty cooked. I remember the first time we did it with all the weight on our back.
I'm already out, basically. Like no matter what the climbing, you can describe the climbing, but I'm already out.
Yeah. And I'm like, I kind of love that shit. I'm like, oh, this is fucked up. Like, I'm like, this is fucked up. Let's, yes, like, this will be great. Nice. And so just get everything up there to like have a go on this thing was like an effort in itself. So I think that in my mind, that was like a third of the experience, is like really, being fit enough to just like do that, and be fine with it. And then wake up the next morning, and climb. That was an experience. And then I think mentally, there was an element mentally of there had been like a fire and we didn't know like if this route had been like affected by this wildfire, and we didn't know how hard pitch 11 and 12 were. The estimate was somewhere between 12B and 13B, and the like just the mental logistics of all the possibilities of like, okay, we need to get to the base of pitch 11 before like noon because if we need to have if we both need 2 goes on both these pitches and we need to get down, we're dealing with that. Or are we going to potentially bring up a ledge, or we're going to potentially haul some stuff to like sleep if they're harder and we're not sending them fast. And like all of these questions take on a lot of load, and there's a lot of conversation that needs to kind of happen about like with you and your partner about like what's our decision-making framework for some of this, and then add to it that nobody had sent it before, and so like rock quality is always like also in my mind, and the rock quality on the crux pitches was awesome, and that ended up not being a big deal at all because they were fairly like blank headwall crux pitches, so that ended up being not a non-issue, but like all of the questions that I just kind of rambled, so I feel like...
No, it's good. Yeah. Yeah.
And climbing well right now, on demand, executing now, because we really don't have, like, we're not going to walk back to camp and walk back up here. We're doing it, like, if we don't do it now, to redo all of that other stuff to get ourselves back up here is like such a huge push. So like the execution mentally of being like this is happening now, or like very quickly, or like, we don't have time to faff around. And
right,
so
it's just limited
this
offer.
is limited, and then get down to camp, and not,
and it's all ground up, like, because when people free climb on like El Cap, I know enough to know that they like will go around and wrap into the crux pitches if they're if they're prohibitive to get to, like it sounds like you're describing. So it doesn't sound like that was an option here.
Yeah, so that like in that setting, and it's like it's alpine, and then like the weather luckily was just like very, very much not an issue. We had but there was a week and a half period where we couldn't go up because it was not even, I think the high in El Salto was like 2 degrees Celsius, or like just above freezing for a week and a half. And so we're also looking at weather. And so you can kind of like all of this together, climbing was really about a third of it.
Yeah. Okay, we're back after a 2-week break.
We're back.
Carly's back on the podcast. We left it. Well, we didn't leave it. We got interrupted somewhere around you talking about your preparation for this route that you climbed in Mexico. So let's just start over with that. How does one prepare for a 14 pitch objective?
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of it is going to be volume and capacity. And we kind of touched on, you're either going to need time or margin. So whatever the grade is, if we're talking about margin, maybe it's a grade that you commonly on-site. And so that even if it's in a different style, or you need a couple goes on a couple pitches, that you're not really getting into project territory. So that's one way to, and then from there back plan what that day will be like, and try to replicate, in increasingly amounts up to like 80% of that day with whatever climbing you have available to you. So for somebody that's like a guide or living out of the van, maybe you're able to actually replicate something really similar in a different multi-pitch setting. If that's not the case and you have more access to crags, which really when I was training for this, it's kind of more what I had because it was winter in Colorado. And so there's some really nice crags in Clear Creek Canyon that have like a big spread and like a bunch of pitches. And so I was kind of recreating what I thought around this day would look like using those crags in the sun in December. You can do a lot of climbing in Colorado at those crags. So that's kind of the approach I took. If you have less access to outdoor climbing, like you're still going to try to seek out the intensity, the volume, and also just like the mental toil perhaps of that kind of day, even in the gym. And so when you think of that kind of day, there's a big approach. There is pressure, right? In that there is a large amount of climbing in whatever grade range that you're looking at. And then maybe, there's some unknowns and some mental fatigue that you have to consider. And so I think really looking at that whole day and not just being like, okay, it's a 13 pitch climb and there's 5.512s on it or 6.512s on it. Like that's good information and you need that information, but you also need to know what style that's in, what kind of day that's going to be, like in terms of with partner, with weather, with, like style of climbing. Like somehow we need to be able to build that into your training, or into your preparation for kind of your practice days in this, and not discount the fact that you're going to be mentally tired, that there's going to be exposure, that after you get done climbing, you're going to need to rig 7 simul wraps safely, that you might be a little hungry. You're not eating like the most curated assortment of vegetables and lentils at that point in time. You're like, okay, I have 3 bars left and there's a beer at the bivvy, and you're like in a different place with that. And so I think all of the good and bad and challenges that come with these bigger days need to be taken into account when we say training or practice, is bringing in the physical element, the technical element, and also the mental element to that. So by the time you're up on pitch 6 and you need to take a poop and you feel bad and like all of this other stuff, you're kind of like, oh, to some extent I've prepared myself for adversity or unknowns. And so like, yeah, normal, got it. Like you can maintain a sense of calm, which is incredibly important in that venue.
That's like, I have like 50 questions I want to ask, but I think the one that springs most readily to mind is like, how much do you feel like preparing for that uncertainty is something that you can really do? Because you're talking about knowing the style of the route and knowing the difficulty of the route, but in this case you guys really didn't know exactly what you were up against, right? Because it's first ascent. So there's always like a little bit of a
Yeah.
question mark. Or had you like gotten insider info from someone about how hard you thought it was or something?
The two guys that developed the climb gave us a range of, they thought the pitch 11 and 12 were somewhere between 12B and 13B.
Okay.
Which for us, that's somewhere.
It's a big range.
That's a big range. and giving something 3 goes, like if you need 3 goes on it, but you're at pitch 11 and you're going to be dealing with the sun is going to set. And so then if you're not on-sighting, you're introducing a whole other range of questions logistically. We really didn't want to tag the ground. We really didn't want to do any jugging. We wanted like true alpine style ground up ascent. So for us, there was a lot of pressure to execute those pitches very quickly. And we didn't know, right? We didn't know the grade. But I guess maybe for the context of our discussion, like thinking about a bigger multi-pitch climb where the grades are known and maybe it's not a first ascent would be like a little more useful, and thinking about like, okay, but how do you prepare for the unknowns or the adversity? Because you're never going to exactly know what it is.
Yeah.
And so I actually think this is a really good question, because you can't prepare for the unknowns. That's the definition of, if you could prepare for the unknowns, exactly, they would be known. Mm-hmm. So to prepare for the unknowns is really to prepare your thinking.
Sure.
To prepare, okay, that's not what I expected. What are the tools in front of me? What are the options in front of me? What are the potential outcomes? Like kind of playing that little chess game with logistics inside of your own mind, and then also being like, and I guess in this way it can be kind of a bit of like a stoic practice where you're like, here's 4 potential outcomes or 4 potential scenarios. Like, do I trust myself and do I accept emotionally all the outcomes? So like, we don't send, we send but we have to project it, we send and we on-site it. Like all these different things, you have to kind of be like, we have to be okay with all of that, and then prepared to, what are we going to do with all of that?
That is adding a lot of certainty to the equation, for sure.
Yeah. And maybe you don't know exactly all of these things, but by going through this process, and I'll like go through this process with athletes, I'll be like, okay, we're going out for this end. Like, let's talk about the potential outcomes that could happen up there. And some of your ideas for how that might make you feel, how you would deal with that intensity in that moment, or technically, like from a ropes perspective and like a technical skills perspective, like what you would do. And just by kind of walking through that for like 10 or 15 minutes, you start to realize that most people that are in the depth of climbing, of like doing a 13 pitch climb, you have a lot of skills and you have a lot of self-efficacy there. And just kind of walking through some of those scenarios, either to yourself or with a coach or in a journal, you can kind of be like, okay, I could handle that one. Like, okay, I wouldn't like that one, but I could handle that one too. And like, you go through that and you're not going to ever, how do I say this? You're not going to ever just be like, oh, I've imagined everything that could happen. That's actually not the point of the exercise.
Right.
The point of the exercise is to get you realizing that you have the ability to deal with it.
Yeah, is that something you would deliberately build into your training? Because I'm kind of, I guess I'm trying to compare this to other modes or other, like, you know, I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are probably boulderers.
Yeah.
I'm not super likely to go out and project a 13 pitch climb anytime soon.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. But I do think that tolerance to uncertainty is like a really, really important part of athletic performance in our sport, just because it's not like tennis where, like, even if you travel to a different place to play tennis, like the tennis court is pretty much, you know, it's a different surface and things are slightly different. Maybe the weather is slightly different, but like literally we're talking about like the rock is made out of something different. The rock is a different angle. The holds are different shapes. The grip types are different. The technique is different. The weather patterns are different. It's like the entire environment can be totally unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most impressive things to me, you know, as a coach, you can probably relate to the idea that like an athlete who comes to you with a clear goal and a clear vision is just much easier to train than an athlete who comes to you with an abstract, like, it'd be nice to get better. And like one of the most impressive things to me is when athletes show consistently that they can like kind of show up to the crag and perform at a very high level without knowing what they were going to be up against. And that's like true across disciplines, right? Like that's, to me, that's really impressive with people who boulder at a high level, like across all styles, and just like show up in Squamish and climb like a V10 compression problem and a V10 like slab in the same day. Like I find that totally impressive, even if it's a very different kind of impressive than like somebody doing a 13 pitch multi-pitch. So, okay, I'm going to rewind all the way to my question now, which is when you're training for something like this, you know, when you're having those days out, are you like pre-planning what routes you're going to do? Or are you kind of like showing up to the crag and trying to give yourself a little bit of that, like, I don't know what I'm even going to do with my training day, I'm just going to get totally worked and like try to onsite a bunch of hard stuff? Like, how much do you bake that in, you know?
I think that's good. There's two ways. One is how, like, a part of my training was like, I'm going to go to the little Eiger Crag in Clear Creek Canyon, which is a crag that I've heard has a lot of 11s. I've never been there. I'm going to try to onsite the entire crag. Even when I'm at the point where I really don't want to climb anymore and my feet hurt. And then I will tell myself, okay, this is the 11C that counts. All that other stuff, like, was getting you to the point where now you're on setting an 11C and you really don't feel like it. Alternately, with a partner, you can do some fun things, which I will sometimes do with people, like in a gym, where it'll be like, you know, your partner's picking out what you're climbing. So there's a built-in unknown in that way that you're
like that.
Deal with. And that, I think, is another way to like mentally get just like a little broken down. Like, you know, where you're kind of like, oh God, because that's exactly what it's going to feel like. You need to have some familiarity with that space. And then being like, I'm going to crank it out anyway, to prepare for kind of like that type of venue. So whatever you can do, and then there's like, whatever you can do to kind of bake that into what you're really trying to train for an experience. And in that case, the experience just involves a lot of different things that a crag day maybe wouldn't. And so prepping yourself for that just kind of follows in that avenue, and you just think about it from all angles, I guess.
Yeah, smart. It's the whole having your partner pick the thing for you. I'm just going to constantly relate your like badass achievements in the mountains back to my like very humble bouldering life. But
no, dude, these V12, like, you see me on a V12 boulder, you'll be like, oh, she's got a lot to learn there.
You just need the right one. When my wife and I climb in the gym, I'll often have her pick problems for me, and I'll like try to pick problems for her because I'm just a total coward in the gym. Like gym style bouldering has gotten increasingly hard for me over the years, especially post COVID, because I don't really go to the gym that much anymore. But if my wife is like, I think you can do this like V8 or this V9, I'll be like, oh shit, like my wife thinks I can do it. Like, you know, that means I have to. And then I like look at it and I'm like, oh, this looks terrifying. I would never have chosen this for myself. But I'll like try to rise to the occasion, you know, and usually get scared and drop off the top. Do you think about like volume and capacity development? I'm sure you do, and I'm opening a can of worms, but do you think about those things dramatically differently for bouldering versus sport climbing versus multi-pitch climbing? Yeah,
I mean, bouldering, like, if we think about, just like, since we're using it as the example, like the pitch 11 ended up being 12C. Like, I didn't pull more than just like endurance-y, you know, like V3, V4 was max. And granted, it was my 6-5-12 of the day, but like I was never digging into like max power, max engagement, max strength at any point.
Yeah.
Whereas like with bouldering, of course, like you are so much more, you know, like just thinking about like Leavenworth boulders. I did like Emperor's Lightning when I was out there, you know, and like digging way deeper into my max strength to climb that. And so I do think they're very different. I'd be curious too to like how you know, so like I will do some, because essentially I think of bouldering capacity as like how long can you climb without getting powered down, like that slightly. So different, these are different capacities, I think, for sure.
I agree. I think the thing that I've become increasingly like interested in is like density, because 10 years ago for me, I was mostly interested in like how many hard tries can I have on the boulder, like period, in a day or in a weekend. And as my life has gotten busier and busier, like I live closer to the crag, so I can get out to the boulders a little bit more often, but like my sessions are never, I can't rest 40 minutes between every try the way that I used to. And so like the density style capacity is a lot more important than it used to be, especially as the boulders get long. That has become like super complicated for me to train for. And it's just a way different, you know, I would train that person way differently than 10 years ago me, who has a lot more time and a lot more energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can hit max power a lot more times in a day if you have a longer session, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, you're like, I don't get to hang out for 40 minutes. I get, I have this set chunk of time to go and try this boulder. So that's, if I can have some density training, I can get 5 good goes as opposed to 3.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, and the typical advice I give to people, and this is, I've seen this make a, 1 or 2 V grade improvement in people's climbing in a season, is like, instead of resting the minimum amount of time you think you need to have another good try, just think about how many good tries you can have in a day and how much time you have, and like do the division. So if you think you can have 10 good tries and you have 5 hours, you better be resting a half an hour. Like,
yeah,
there's no reason why rest 7 minutes when you could rest 30 minutes and have a better go. But man, that math doesn't work out for me anymore.
Damn it. Yeah. So okay, so tell me, like, so if you're at home, you have like a home woody, right? Like what's your density session look like?
So the one I've been doing now, which I think has been working pretty well, is I do just interval style red points on like a very hard boulder that's about the same length as what I'm trying to do. So sometimes it'll be 2 boulders on my home wall. And it's basically you're just resting like 30 or 40% less than you would want to in between tries.
Okay.
And it's savage. It's like probably the hardest single session that I've like ever done on my home wall. Cause with a lot of endurance stuff you're doing, I would do like 4x4s at like V6 on my wall or something like that. But this is like, I'm doing a V9 or V10 on my wall, and then I'm trying to do it again like 2 minutes later. And like, maybe you succeed the first 2, but you're going to try like 4 times.
Yeah.
And then you move on to the next.
Like fast.
It drops fast. But the cool thing is, like, as you learn the boulders and you do the session a few times, like it actually does adapt pretty quickly.
Cool.
At least it has so far.
Yeah.
For me. I guess the other really interesting thing about capacity is, I'm just geeking out about things I've learned. Yeah. I'm really curious how this applies to your experience with sport climbing and multi-pitch. When I work hard boulders, I find that those early sessions where I'm just working moves are quite like long and not super duper tiring, because there's so much falling and failing, and you're trying to be powerful, but you're not sustaining it. And then whatever that first session is where you're giving burns instead of just trying moves, I get blasted.
You get blasted.
You know what I mean?
Well, that makes sense, because there's like a lot of part of that. There's like very initial beta sessions for bouldering where you're maybe not even like getting to the point where you're leveraging enough of your position to be trying the move. You're kind of figuring out how to get to the point to leverage. Yeah,
still coordinating. Yeah,
like the coordinating. And I think basically unless we're talking about like an absolute limit project, like for sport climbing, it's more going to be like that first beta burn is going to be the hardest. You're going to be the most tiring, because you have like, the most recent climb I did in Turkey, there was like maybe a V6/V7, not quite no hands rest, and then like another V6 in a different style. And like, for sure, the first time that you're on it, you can kind of make all the moves, but you're doing it as a V8 because you haven't figured out how to do it as a V6 yet. So that beta session for sport, I find the very first time I'm on a route, I'm like, I actually tell myself this, and I talk to athletes about this all the time for sport. I'm like, this is the hardest this will ever feel.
Yeah.
Is that first time. And you're going to come down and you're going to be like, I only gave it 2 burns and I'm wrecked. I'm like, yeah, but you did that boulder like 6 times inefficiently. So you really gave it way more than 2 burns in that way.
That's smart.
So,
yeah.
I think maybe bouldering has a bit of like, you have to even like ramp up, and to get to that like first give burns, so you have a couple sessions, you get there, you get wrecked by it because now you're actually leveraging. And with sport, usually you're starting where you're actually leveraging.
What do you think, like with really hard sport projects? I'm kind of pivoting from multi-pitch because it's just too foreign for me. Not really. Okay, what do you think with really hard sport projects about like how long to work the moves rather than like to start giving it burns to develop those kind of specific endurances and efficiencies, truthfully, because intuitively you're going to develop a lot of movement efficiencies as you try it from the ground?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's interesting traveling around and seeing such vastly different takes on this. Or not even, I think, first of all, I think a lot of people aren't thinking about this, so I don't think they actually have a take. And that's maybe is like a little bit of my own, this is going to be like a Carly Rager hot take, is like, most people haven't thought about it.
Yeah, we're gonna clip this for Instagram for sure. Give us something juicy.
Like, I got like most people are out there and they're like, I'm working this climb, and then they're working it, and then they're trying to give goes on it, and then they're falling in the same spot, and then they keep doing that, and they keep doing that, and then they like maybe eventually send it or they don't. And there's like, for strong climbers, honestly, like when I was working Turkish Airways, there's somebody out working it with me who climbs like V9, V10. Like these are not like, but like their red point strategy hasn't been developed, or like their ability to, they're missing like the soft skills of red pointing sometimes. And so like they haven't thought about, should I give it red point burns today? Or if I've fallen at the same spot for the last 3 sessions, should I rework beta, improve my breathing, low point it,
do some low points,
do something to like break up this process? Or did I go to the red pointing stage too soon?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that come from the boulder, I'm going to say a lot of, because I can't say everybody, but a lot of people that come from the bouldering background will often get into, I'm giving it red point burns maybe a session too soon before they really understand some of the nuances of the movement. And then also sometimes they just don't really know how to breathe rhythmically.
Yeah. Well, if they're truly experienced boulderers, I think they probably have a little bit of efficiency blindness. It's just like, and I struggle with that so bad. I mean, when you talk about like doing a V6 boulder, but you're actually doing it as a V8, like I mean this in the most humble way possible, but like it's very hard for me sometimes to tell whether I'm doing something in the V6 way when I'm on a route. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I actually have to try it from the ground and get really pumped and be like, oh, actually, yeah, this is not an easy method. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I didn't know that when I was hanging on the rope.
And more experienced sport climbers, and the more skilled people get in the sport climbing realm, they get faster at delineating between, there's 3 betas that work, but I know this will be the red point beta. I know that at this point my core is going to be tired, so I'm going to do it this way. I know at this point my forearms are going to be pumped, so I'm going to do it this way. And you'll see really, really, you know, I'm going to put in quotes, strong, air quotes, like strong sport climbers actually are extremely mentally skilled at making those decisions sooner. And I think that comes with like deep, like that's like deep into like, we've been sport climbing for a long time, but on the, even like back that up a level or two is just like, when we're talking about like when do we give it red point burns, I think a lot of people just aren't even asking that question. and that would be a great place to start, is like, does this feel like this, like I appropriately understand the nuance of the movement to give it red point burns, that I'm doing this V6 efficiently, or whatever these little tweaks need to happen. Am I ready for that? And that just opens up a whole can of worms of other interesting questions about your movement, about the way you're doing it, and things like that. And I think that's a spectrum. Like, then we have people that are working it a bit too long before they're willing to give it some a muerte. And we also learn a lot in the a muerte. And so it's like a weird, like, you know, there's like bumpers on this. And I think a sport climber that really wants to progress is kind of always just like asking those questions of themselves. Like, did I jump to red pointing too soon? Signs of that might be that you're falling at the same spot over and over and over for like 3 sessions in a row. If you're falling in the same spot for 3 sessions in a row, you're, like either under-trained, the route is too hard, or you jump to red pointing too soon. Like, if you red point the very first time you try to red point, right, that's probably the other bumper, and you're trying to shoot the gap on that the best you can. And I think the first thing is just starting to ask those questions, because it'll lead to a lot of fun conversations too with everybody at the crag, you know, like people that are working the same route as you, and you get to have those dialogues essentially.
It just lets you be like more intentional with what it is you're trying to do when you leave the ground. And I think that should basically always be like one of the goals of improving your climbing practice, is just like having, maybe you don't have the perfect reason. Maybe, you know, you still do want to be intuiting things and not like trying to be robotic necessarily, but trying to have some reasons for some of the things that you do is probably a good idea.
You can be intentional without being robotic, right? That's a false binary, right? It's like the intention of this is to understand that little section, smooth out that section. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, I think I climb with a lot of people who, like boulderers who I think their process is very opaque to me. Like, I'm always asking myself when I'm climbing with other people, like, what is it they're trying to do right now? So if I'm working the boulder and they're also working the boulder and we've been working it for a similar amount of time, I'm always kind of thinking, like, are they at a different place in the process than me, or like what is it they're working on? And I just generally find, like, the more elite or the more experienced the person is, the more clear it is to me from the outside what it is they're trying to do in their process. And so, like, when I climb with people who, you know, I've climbed at the, I'll just say, like, V12, 13 level for 10 plus years, which I have a few friends like that around here, I always can tell exactly what they're working on. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, he's refining the top out. Oh, he's working on the crux move. Oh, he's like thinking through the beta for this part. Oh, he's giving red point goes, you know, and then I like, shut the fuck up. It's like very clear. But when I work with people who, or climb with people who are less experienced, I'm usually just asking myself, like, they're all over the place. Like, what are they trying to do right now? You know? And I think that's bouldering, but sport climb is like even more punishing for that indecision, because the commute is so taxing.
The commute, yeah. Like, how many times do you want to fall on the last bolt?
Yeah.
Oh, like, a lot? Because I don't hang out in like on the climb I did. So Turkish Airways, there's kind of the pumpier bit, or the pumpier crux at the top, and it's all slopers, and there's like 9 of them, and there's also 9 feet, but they're all bad, you know, like they're all tiny. Like there's probably 12 ways that you could do this bit. And it was like, for me, I had solved a few of them, and then I was falling up there, and I fell up there twice, and I was like, that's enough. Like, I don't need to commute up to this fall again. I need to take a step back and look at, like, and I ended up changing 2, like, it's probably like 12 moves, you know, in this. And I changed like 2 major sequences in that. The first, and then I got a new high point, and then I had to rework the second very top bit. And then the very first time that I solved the beta problem for the top bit, like, I found better red point beta, so that was like a mental problem solving activity for me. The very first time I finally solved that for the red point beta, I walked the route.
Yeah.
Walked it. And nice. It was like interesting because you get to see how impactful your problem solving capability actually is. And then you walk this route, and then you're like, well, wait. It's almost like a little weird because you're kind of like, well, okay, clearly my problem solving was the limiting factor there, actually. In sport climbing, this happens where you're like, and so your goal as a sport climber, my goal right now as a sport climber, is to get better at, this is the red point beta, here are 3 options. I need more experience to get better, to get from point A to point B if I want to either send more 13Cs, or like that might be the difference between me sending a 14A, is like getting better at that skill.
For sure.
And of course your physical limitations, or mine, I feel like will come in at 14A as well, but like you have to give credence to the mental limitations that you have as well in your process. I don't know if that feels like relevant to you for bouldering.
Definitely feels relevant. It feels super relevant to my coaching. It takes me back to like where you were talking about the training for the multi-pitch was like not just a physical capacity exercise, but also was very much about like your mental tolerance to the beat down, and like also the psychological, like the emotional toll of climbing on a route like that. And I feel like it's the same thing. You know, people have limitations in all of these different areas, and it's really important to like acknowledge what your limitations are and to like sort of work on it in a discrete way. And I've worked with lots of sport climbers who their bouldering grade was okay for the grade that they wanted to sport climb, but their actual skill of breaking down a boulder problem was maybe not as good, you know? And so like maybe that's a person where they need to go back and do a season of bouldering, not to try to climb a higher bouldering grade, but just to become more efficient at that problem solving process. And similarly, like the style of bouldering that you do probably needs to be like a little bit relevant to the style of boulder problem that you're going to run into on the route, or those skills are maybe not going to transfer as well as they possibly could.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's like the perfect analogous kind of theme is like, you probably have a lot of sport climbers that climb like a V6, but do they really understand all of the elements, or could they do it better, or how are they breaking it down? And maybe that for them. And actually I feel like for me, like if you put me on a V9, Like that part of my problem solving is undercooked.
They're different modes.
They're different
like
modes.
the classic bouldering mode is like, you just need to clear this hurdle. You need to find a way to create enough power to get over the bar, you know? And sport climbing it's much more what you described, where you're like, okay, I have 9 footholds, 9 handholds, so that's like 9 factorial solutions or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I'm not a
like,
math.
it's this many permutations from here to the chains.
Yeah, I mean, and my main sport project, which I'm like in my head spinning up on a lot more now because it'll be like sport climbing season soon. It's like, it definitely is that at the top. It's like, I haven't really figured out the right way to do it, and there's just too many footholds. It's too complex of terrain, you know?
Yeah.
And it's at the very tippy top, so like I know that that's the problem that needs to be solved. But it's like an overhanging dihedral, so it's just not something that I can run out and like practice. I need to actually like get on the route in order to practice it, at least in that specific case.
Yeah. Okay, so then, because I'm thinking like what I do with my athletes when I'm just like, so I had like an athlete right now and they want to climb their first 13A, and we did like a concerted effort on one and got a one hang, but the season was done, and it's kind of like, okay, we'll come back to it. And he had climbed 1 or 2 12 pluses, I think, but like, you know, not a ton, but this 13A was accessible. So like, let's go learned from it. And then we need more red point. We need more experience with that problem solving process is like my thought process as a coach, and like the training surrounding that too. But I was like, we need to go from that, here are all the betas, to here's the red point beta. You need that like 6 more times and like 6 more 12Cs. I don't really actually care about the 12C or if it's a 12B or D. I don't really care, but it's that processing that happens to go from beta, red point, beta, send. And so I'm curious for you for like what the equivalent is then for boulderers. Like if somebody has a big, or you've noticed that they have a problem solving gap or it's underdeveloped in how they break down a boulder, what do you do?
I think there is a similar thing, but yeah, because those problem solving modes are so different, the wonky thing I think with sport climbing versus bouldering is like, all other things being equal, like most people, when they're halfway through the number of days they're going to spend on a sport project, they probably know the macro beta of the route. They probably, like, in theory, if they had infinite endurance, could climb from the bottom to the top. Like, they have a method. Right. Whereas in bouldering, like, especially for me with the hardest boulders I've done, like, sometimes I'm 75% of the way through the number of days that I'm going to spend on the project, and like, I'm not totally sure that I have the macro yet. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's...
Oh, God. I would melt my brain. Oh, man.
Well, that's like that tolerance to uncertainty thing that's like a really, really big deal with high-level bouldering that I think is just very hard to develop without actually being stubborn and kind of beating your head against the wall. Not that that's the strategy I would advise for most athletes, because I think most people actually don't have the problem-solving skills in order to be up against that level of uncertainty. They would just be spinning their wheels, you know? Yeah. And in a lot of the cases where I spent that much time, I was also spinning my wheels. But sometimes it is more efficient than that, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. You're going to go longer. If you're spinning your wheels, you're going to go longer with that before something catches, maybe?
Yeah.
In the
well, it's like, I think it's, I need to think of the right way to like phrase this. There's probably a really elegant analogy, but I just think trying to climb, this is my personal experience, I think trying to climb V13 does not feel the same as trying to climb V12, and that doesn't feel the same as when I was trying to climb V11 and when I was trying to climb V10 or whatever. And those things also change over time, but I just think it's a different experience on different terrain. And I'm pretty sure that it's going to feel the same when you try to climb 14A. It's like, it's not just the grade and the like intimidation of like, ooh, it's a big number and like a tall route or whatever. It's like the skills you need are different. And it's very hard to develop the skills to climb 14A by just doing a lot of 13Cs. It gets you part of the way there, but eventually, like, you have to spend a season failing on the 14A to be like, okay, I need all these other things to line up. Now I can go back and do some Cs and Ds with those things in mind, and I'll develop them. But you have to hammer it a little bit to figure out what those things are. Yeah. I do think the right coach can also help quite a lot, but even the right coach might be like, yeah, it's time to spend a season really getting your ass kicked. Yeah. And then we'll understand what we need to work on.
Actually, that was kind of my fall season last fall. There's a 14A route that I one-hung a couple times at different spots, which, you know, then you just get the red point greed. You're like, I'm so close. I have the red point hunger now. I've one-hung it. But, like, But yeah, I just dug into it for like 3 weeks. I got my ass handed to me. Like, damn. I was like, yeah. And I kind of, for the time being, walked. I mean, it was too cold. It was like I have to walk with my, like, hurt, all these different things, walk away from it. But I had a real clear understanding of what was failing. Mm-hmm. And it was sometimes, I think, also serves the purpose of being like, oh, it's possible. Mm-hmm. And that's encouraging. And then, but yeah, sometimes you have to be, I mean, just like my athlete that's trying to do his first 13-day, he hung it. And then it's like, all right, we got to kind of come back to like whatever, a few grades below that, get some more of that experience. In my case, I think like some like deep core, like some deadlifting, and like was showing up as being, there's a lot of underclings that you're pulling out of and having to maintain tension out of. So anyway, but it kind of, like, we have to dip our toes into the deep end, or in this case, sit down in it for a season, get our ass handed to us, learn something, and then we still might not come away with the send, but we figured out what we need to, like, get better at. And
yeah, there's steps on the journey. You
might not get to do that if you don't go and get your ass handed to you for a little while.
I think the really tricky thing is, like, here's two coaches talking about how virtuous it is to go try the next level, and I do think that is virtuous, but one of the hardest decisions is, like, when is it appropriate to do that versus when is it appropriate for the athlete to go back and red point a bunch of C's or D's or whatever.
Yeah.
And that is like a very personal, context-based decision, I think. So it's not as simple as, like, just get the red point green and go try to do the hard thing.
Yeah. Okay, for me, I do feel like I hit a point with this route that I was trying where there was like 3 sessions in a row without like a marked progress.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I was like, you know, white flag, like, you got me this time, but, like, you know, I'll come back to it later. But for some people, it might be 12 sessions. It might be 2. Like, everybody's got I call this failure tolerance. Mm-hmm. And I think about this a lot. And in terms of, like, when is it time to walk away? In this case, I also had my right knee and my left hamstring tolerance where they were also like, we're pissed.
They were done. Yeah.
Stop. But yeah.
I think I mentioned in our first conversation that I walked away from like one of the 13s that I was trying, which I'm gearing up to try this fall. And I just there was like a couple injuries that I was just like, okay, well, this is no longer like this season project. This isn't even a next season project. This is like a next season project. 'Cause like I got to deal with these things and like I got to buy a lot of different shoes and like find the right pair of shoes, and like there's all these, but I learned those things. I learned those details of like what needs to be more capacious and like where the failure points were. And I don't know. We'll have to talk about it again in a year and see,
right?
If I was right.
Yeah, we should. But yeah, you learned that by pushing, and to some extent, we need to do that. We can't do it all the time, but there needs to be seasons of that, and you know, in that way, I think pushing can be really good, even if you come up with you might come up with failure, but you also come up with knowledge, and that's like the second. That's maybe even more important.
So that's kind of a good shift of topic. Like you did a 13C in Turkey, good job, congrats. You also did 13C in Colombia right before that, right?
Yeah. Wait, can I tell you the backstory of the 13C I did in Turkey, because I think it's funny?
Let's do it. Yeah.
And I was like telling people that I was hanging out with this about. So when we did that first podcast episode, when we were struggling with all the IT issues, it was like raining. I was like, when it's raining, the internet was not as good, so I was at this restaurant to try to do the podcast episode. So it was like 9 p.m. my time, and the internet, and then the chargers and the adapters. I was like walking around like a Best Buy, like a Best Buy Christmas tree with all my things, trying to get it to work, you know. And then I was also planning to go for red point burns the next morning.
Oh wow! Okay.
On this route.
Just a low stress day.
I was like, well, no, we just call it exciting. It was engaging.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was doing all of this, but they were like, we have to close the restaurant, and I was like, okay, no, because it's the only place that has internet right now, and then the time change, and then power adapters, and all the things, and the Wi-Fi. And I was like, all right, I was like, what can we do here? And I was like, all right, guys, round of beer on me, like, Can you please keep it open for another hour or so? Because like I'm gonna do this, and they were like, sure, yeah, we could do that. And I was like, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate it. Like, you know, I'll probably buy you another round. Whatever. This is just like the reality of working when you're traveling. Like sometimes you're just in situations where like, yeah, this is
yeah.
And so we had our conversation, and then I was thinking they were all just gonna go grab themselves a beer and have a beer while we talked, and then like, okay, good night, blah blah blah. But you're in Turkey, and it's like eating together, drinking together is like a very big part of it. So they waited for me to get off the call so we could all have the beer together. So now it's like 11:30 p.m. I'm like,
you signed a contract and you didn't know it.
Yeah. But at the same time, I was so grateful. They were so nice, and I was so grateful that so two of them were Turkish, one was from Iran, and I was so grateful to get to like sit and talk with them. However, usually I don't drink like this big, like a huge beer the night before a Red Point attempts at like 11:30 p.m. That's not
not ideal.
Not ideal. Like that's not whatever. Like, but I was like, just embrace this. Like you have some more time. If tomorrow is not the day, you know, at least you got to have this really cool like cultural experience and interchange, and you drink a big beer at whatever. So anyway, it was just one of those things I had to laugh about because I was like, this is just what's in front of me right now, and like I'm appreciative. So anyway, drink a big beer. I go to bed at like 1, and I was like, but I was happy, even though our conversation got cut off, I was happy that we got to connect. I was happy about this, and I was just like genuinely in a good mood. And then I sent that warning.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. I sort of assumed that's where it was going. I was like, you wouldn't tell this whole story if you were falling at the boulder problem, right?
Yeah. So,
man, sometimes something like that can really lower your expectations. Yeah. I feel like I've been riding that, whatever that phenomenon is, like since my daughter was born. There's so many days out where I'm just like, I feel like shit. I woke up 7 times last night. My wrist is like janky from holding the baby all the time, you know? I was like, nope, sent the thing. Yep. Like expectations were low, so it worked out okay.
Yeah, like kind of the same thing. I was like, I'm just going to rip it. And like, I know that I'm not in tippy top, but I was with people then, we were all giggling. It was just like generally the mood was good. And it was like, it was just one of those funny.
Yeah. But maybe 13C is just not that hard for you. Maybe it's like you can do 13C after a boot-sized beer the night before.
Yeah, I guess. Or what really was that I solved the top beta. I finally solved that puzzle. But I just thought that was funny because it was like right in conjunction with our conversation, and then I sent, and then I was like, oh, this is funny. But sidebar, what was your? I feel like I got distracted.
Okay, so the original question was like, from the outside, I mean, I just find sport climbing so tiring. I know that sport climbers probably think bouldering is really tiring, but it's just I find the endurance aspect. I'm much more the power phenotype, I think, and I have that efficiency blindness, like I mentioned, which does get better when I sport climb more. All that to say, I think going on 2 big international trips, basically, or it's one trip with 2 places, climbing a really hard route on both of them. Just did that hard multi-pitch. You were trying a 514. Like, it seems like you push quite hard, like pretty much all the time. Mm. And I think you're training hard in between those. Like, do you take big breaks? Do you take psychological breaks? Yeah. Like, how do you think about the bigger picture of your year when you're performing like that?
Yeah. It's funny. I actually don't feel that way. I feel like and maybe this is the distortion of the internet.
It's like image crafting, yeah.
Right, of like image crafting or whatever. But you're right. Like February and March, I was like, I'm going to get it. Like, I am going for it. And I very much was consciously like climbing, like my personal climbing was like that priority during those months. But in January, December, I was working a ton, family Christmas, training a ton. Like I was not doing anything. But I think there's there's like a bias there of like, you're going to see stuff on the internet of when I did do things and less stuff of when I'm eating cinnamon rolls. You know, to be honest, like you're just not like, I mean, I could post more cinnamon roll content. Don't get me wrong. But, like,
actually, I was gonna say, I think people love that content. But,
yeah. But like, I think it's like funny. I've been having conversations around this, but like I see, and
I see things a lot in charts and graphs. I think that like has been in my brain since I drug myself through 6 years of engineering school. But like, I very much feel like it's like a sinusoidal wave with like a slight upticking trend, right?
Yeah.
Where I have months where, I'm like performing, and then I have months where I'm super not. It's like right now, as we record this, like super not performing.
Sure.
And I'm aware of that. I made that conscious decision, and I think that's actually really, really important. And I think people get caught in the performing all the time mentality, or pushing it all the time mentality, thinking that that's going to get them further on, like, if we have like a linear line, that they're just going to keep going, and then that they're going to be collecting the area, like they're going to grow, they're going to be collecting more area onto the curve if they never drop, if they never have a dip. I think that is a myopic way of thinking about it, though, because in order to have those absolute max efforts, I think, and have like the high amplitude, you need to also have the low amplitude. And like, I wish I could like draw on a whiteboard, but like we're adding a sine wave to like a y equals mxb, and like you want to see that continue to go. And when we're only looking at this little area of it, we can think, oh my gosh, like I should keep pushing even though I'm psychologically and emotionally not there. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want to let a dip happen, because if a dip happens, that means like, what if I'm on a downward trajectory? And it's like, if you zoomed in on that tiny little bit, it would look like a downward trajectory, but like if you zoom out, you're seeing this like kind of upward trending sine wave. And so I think that's extremely important for especially more experienced climbers to think about, who like have the potential burnout or get injured, is that like pick your performance seasons. Like for me, it's usually in the fall, and it's like February, March, and like October, November. And I'm really like in it, and I will schedule my like life around this too, where I'm like, these months is my climbing. And then by the end of Turkey, I'm like a noodle, and I don't really care anymore, and I'm like apathetic and I just want to like drink coffee and read a book, and then I'm like, great, now we're on the dippy part of that experience. And then I've told myself, for April, the most important thing to me is work. In May, it's relationships, and I pretty much oscillate between, so it's like my personal climbing, my relationships, and work. And I'm intentionally saying April is work, and I'm intentionally saying May is relationships.
That's cool.
And I'm intentionally saying by the time July comes back around, so July and August, I'd like to perform again. But I can kind of think about all of those as this sine wave, or this, thing that and you're asking yourself, what is the priority right now? And we're terrible at having more than one. I'm personally awful at it.
Well, I mean, the word priority, this is a really cliche thing to say on a podcast, but it literally means like the thing, like the one thing.
The one thing. And so when I was in Turkey, when I was in Colombia and Turkey, like my personal climbing, that was the one thing. And I've seen now through several seasons of like, kind of like having to design my life to like have periods of focus on different things, is like, it's so much easier to send hard when I'm not trying to run a business, run marketing, do accounting, run like review, like the way that I've designed it is like, and then you see the performance come through because my mental was all in one place, and you're like, okay,
there's space for it.
There's space for it.
Right
now I'm just like lifting 2 times. I'm lifting like 2 or 3 times a week and chilling and working.
Nice. Yeah, that frees up so much time when you're not trying to perform at climbing, like, because climbing is just so time consuming, especially rope climbing of any kind. Bouldering is also, people spend a lot of time on bouldering. I don't know if it's always productive to spend that much time on it, but I think that's kind of the what you're saying is basically to be very intentional with what you're thinking about or what you're working on, and kind of be aware of that super compensation curve. And I would say like that makes a lot of sense. And then the flip side of it is like, when I realize I don't always plan ahead. That's very shrewd. I don't think I'm as good at that. I think I pretty much want my personal climbing to be good all the time. But one thing that I am good at is when I realize I'm on the downward slope, I usually like accept it and like let it happen and go with it. I'm a lot better at that. And that gets easier over the years, because the regression to the mean for me, like my average performance is a lot more fun and like quote good than it was 10 years ago. Or at least I'm more comfortable with it. Like I can still go out and climb. Like last year I sent a really hard boulder, and then like the subsequent, 3-4 weeks of like okay-ish weather at the end of the season after I sent that boulder, I was just ripping through so many moderates, and I really wasn't like focused on it or paying that much attention to my climbing. But I was just having a blast climbing on things that were like fun and doing some high balls and stuff like that. And like I've gotten a lot better at that, where I'm like, okay, we hit a nice peak, probably, now it's the roller coaster ride down and things are going to be really grim, but like the weather's still good, so I'm just going to like enjoy a bunch of like, easier climbing. And yeah, maybe both of those are successful.
Right? Like your experience, you've seen it come around enough that like when you're in the downward that it comes back up because you've seen it enough times.
Yeah, I think I say this often in consults, and I'll drop it on the podcast too. Like I think one of the worst things you can do is think about it as like a high water mark on a pier, where it's like the water is going up and down and it goes up to here, and then it's like, shit, I really hope it goes up to there again. I really hope it goes up to there again. It's like, that's not how you want to think about your climbing. That's very one-dimensional. Yeah. What I think of is like, you hit this peak on the landscape, and then I think, okay, I came from back there, but I'm not looking back there. I hit this peak and I'm looking this way because I'm going this way. So like, where is the next peak on the landscape? Yeah. And just by virtue of that metaphor, you understand, like, in order to get from this peak to that peak, you got to go back down into the valley. And the shortest path between 2 points is not a straight line. Like, it's very hard to tell what it's going to be like. Yeah. But now that I'm here, I can see like what the next thing is, and I'm definitely in the valley now. I got a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah, totally. So then, like, thinking about, like, it's so funny that we got similar conclusion with a different analogy. So if we think about this uptrending sine wave, I'm at a valley right now, and my valley right now is higher than my peak.
It's alpine.
My valley right now is higher than my peak was 4 years ago.
Totally.
Sick.
Yeah, I mean, it's the prominence of the peak and the absolute elevation of the peak are like two different things, but that doesn't even really matter to me. The journey I'm on is just like, I'm trying to get to a cool place in the landscape. That's much more how I think about it. Yeah. Because when I did the like high water mark on the pier thing for 5 years, 8 years, whatever it was, I just felt burned out, honestly. Just trying to like I don't know if you've ever had an 8A.NU scorecard, or maybe you have one now.
No, there's a few things that I don't like to I recognize in myself that these are things that I will latch onto that don't always help me.
Yes. So for the years that I had an 8A, it's like it tells you your top 10 things over the last year. That's what your score is based on. And I would literally be like, oh, it's February and I sent a V11 last March. So if I don't send a new V11 by this March, like my score is going to go down. Right. And I it's not like I was ever ranked or like ever meant anything to anybody except me. That was just the platform just gained that control over me because I like let it have it, basically. Yeah. And
what is so appetizing about that self-measuring or that self-validation?
Why would we turn this thing that we love so much into points? I have no idea.
Yeah. I was giving a private lesson this morning, and I think the point system and this kind of thing can draw a very specific type of climber into it. It's typically an overachiever in general, and because they like points, and they've always had throughout their whole life somebody give them some points or some stars and be like, tap them on the head and be like, you're very good, you're okay. And then like climbing, if we're doing that in climbing, like we've all seen where that goes, and it typically is going to end up in either like a wobbler at the crag or like some other whatever, and it's not going to be great. But it's funny how the gamification of climbing though is still so attractive to us all initially because we were like, somebody tell us that I'm like, am I good? Yeah.
Oh man, I guess it all just reverse engineers to our childhoods, doesn't it?
Dude, I know, it's wild. And so I was like the quote from Whose Line Is It Anyway, where they're like, all the points are made up. And wait, what is it? It's like all the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Like I want that to just be like, I don't know, just like a motto, like all the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Like these are small imperfections on million-year-old geological formations. Like, and then we have our 8A.NU scorecard, and you're like trying to rectify those two things, and you're like, okay.
It's like I've been on this kick of we're like way off topic from real climbing now, but that's okay. That's what this podcast is for. I've been on this kick of like Gogol and like Kafka, like kind of Russian absurdism, And something that I like really relate strongly in those stories to climbing is how like they can have something happening that's just so ridiculous and so absurd on its face, but also like everybody in the story takes it completely seriously. And like I mean, that is the essence of absurdism. Basically, it's like it wouldn't be absurd if it wasn't also serious or real at the same time. And I feel like that's totally climbing. It's like I have to recognize on the one hand that like there is nothing special about V14. It's just like another rock that I would climb. And it's just not, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's totally absurd to give it so much power. But on the other hand, like the fact that I think that I could do it and that I want to do it, and the fact that that drives me so intensely is a fundamentally like real part of my personality and my connection to the sport that's driven my life. Like, and I have to hold those two ideas in mind at the same time.
What Gogol? It sounds like you might have read The Nose or The Trial by Kafka.
Both of those, the Metamorphosis, the Overcoat, like I love them all. Yeah, Metamorphosis is just amazing.
Yeah, Metamorphosis is. Let me add Invitation to a Beheading by Vladimir Nabokov to your list of Russian absurdist novels. Yeah. Because it's kind of an absurd. That's funny that I have like a pretty like deep knowledge of Russian literature because I'm just a nerd like that.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But
all right.
But yeah, okay. Back on topic. Sorry, we got way off.
I gotta ask what's I mean I think we should start to wrap up, but I gotta ask like what is the July-August performance window? What's the goal?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go to Lander and teach and show the film about the FA, and I'm planning to stick around. And there's this area called Strawberry Roan. And there's, I think it's like 13C, 13C, 13D, 14A. And so I have never been out there, but like the feature aesthetically is very appealing to me. So my idea and my plan is that I want to pick out one of those, whatever one just kind of like calls to me, and red point it. So that's kind of like,
awesome. That'll be
next.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I wish you the best of luck. This is wide ranging and super fun, honestly. And I know that we didn't get to like 70% of our notes again.
We're gonna have to, yeah. We'll come back for another round.
We'll do more for sure. Cool. Thank you so much, Carly.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you later.